Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Uh, I know. I didn't make a video last week. I know some of you were worried. You were terrified. By the way, for like the last 3 days in Iowa, where I'm at right now, it was like 80 degrees. So it's like a little warm here today. I've got a fan running, so if my audio is a little screwed up, it's probably because of the fan. Like I said, I was gone for a week. I know you were worried. I know you were. You're about to call the cops, send somebody to the house. I know you were thinking. You were worried about my health, my well-being. You were worried about Max, who was feeding Max. You were terrified. I know you. Yeah, you didn't give a shit. I get it. Hey. You didn't give a shit, and that's okay. That's all right. You don't have to give a shit. That's fine. Don't worry about it. This is a YouTube video, not a fucking intervention or anything. Max says hi, by the way. Say hi, Max. Hi, everybody. I'm Max. Last week was a bad week for your unemployed. By the way, still unemployed. I have shaved, but I'm still unemployed. It's easier to stay shaved when interviews come up than to deforest. So I'm just kind of letting it grow a little bit and then zapping it all off. Last week was a rough week. If you've watched these videos in the past, if you haven't, but if you have, you know my dad he's batshit crazy. He's got dementia, my father. He's in a rest home that's about 30 miles that way from me, in that direction. He had a bad week, wanting to go home, screaming and yelling, being a little abusive, bad language, all that fun stuff. By the way, fun fact, if you get dementia, it manifests itself one of two ways. One, bad temper and bad language is one way it manifests itself. And two, sexual language. Like there's a lady who has dementia at Dad's rest home who, like, just whenever she sees a man, no matter what his age, walk by her, she asks for his cock. She does. I swear to God. It's the funniest thing you've ever seen. She's like 90. It's fantastic. It's just your grandma talking about cock. I swear to God. Strike me down. It's hilarious. Talk to a doctor, they'll tell you. Anyway, he had a bad week, so I've been running back and forth trying to calm him down so they don't throw him out of the place. And it sucks. I don't want my dad there, but it's to the point now where he can't take care of himself. If he were to go home by himself, he would die because he wouldn't take his medication. He probably wouldn't eat. He wouldn't know what day it was, what time of day it was, except whether it was dark or light. He wouldn't bathe himself. He can't take care of himself anymore, and it's kind of sad. And I pretty much spent the week trying to calm him down. Me and my brother. That was part of the week. I'm in school. Also, if you haven't watched prior video, how's the hair? The hair's a little spiky today. Interesting. I go to school. I'm trying to finish my bachelor's, my 4-year degree online. Which, if you haven't done it and you want to do it. Trust me. Just do it. It's going to suck. You're going to pay for it. But it's if you're worried that you won't pass, just do it. Because I think you're better than you think you are. We'll talk about that down the line sometime. Anyway, I'm in 2 courses. Well, I was in 2 courses. One was a 5-week course and one was a 10-week course. I'm still in the 10-week course. The 5-week course ended last week. Now, when you're on the school I'm at, when you're in a course, your week goes from Monday to Sunday. In other words, you start on a Monday and you have to turn in your assignments on a Sunday. But every course I've taken, the last week of the course is now Monday through Friday. You don't get Saturday and Sunday. And this particular course, and it was a programming course, I had to write a program, and I had to write 2 separate papers for the course and have it all turned in by Friday. And, you know, with Dad going nuts, and I'm in another course, too, on top of it, which has its own assignments that need to get done. It's a project management course. I had to do a mock budget, and I had to do a lot of online courses, by the way, are just you responding to classmates in discussion boards. At least in this school it is. But that's a huge part of the more discussions you do, the better grade you get. So I try to do as much discussion board activity as possible. But it takes a lot of time, so you got to do the typing and stuff. So I had that going on. Plus, I'm unemployed. I'm still trying to find a job. Responding to requests for my resume, talking to people on the phone, setting up interviews. Last week was just a perfect storm of shit. And Dad, of course, having his issues. So I didn't get a video done last week. So I apologize to all you. I know you expect more of me than that, but hey, I think it's worth the price of admission, which is free. That's what happened. That was my week last. So what happened? Did I miss anything last week? Anything happen? Anything happen? I'm fucking with you. Last week, of course, President Trump fired James Comey, the former director of the FBI. I only bring it up for a reason, though. If you watch the videos, you know this video is about James Comey. And the reason I bring it up is because what happened to James Comey and what happened to me has some very interesting parallels. And I'm going to prove to you that I used to work for a Donald Trump and that you've worked for a Donald Trump. And I'm going to... Granted, James Comey's situation and my situation are completely different. But what happened during the process of us losing our jobs, oddly similarities floating around in there. And we're going to talk about that when we get past the break. An ode to James Comey. Unemployed, Matt Clark. Live from Casa de Clark in beautiful Independence, Iowa, it's Unemployed with your host, Matt Clark. Before we get going, I just wanted to mention the passing of 2 of my favorite character actors of all time, Powers Boothe and Michael Parks. You've probably seen more of them than you think. They're just 2 of my favorite actors of all time, and it's just sad to see them go. We've lost too many good ones this year so far. But, on to the stupidity. Here's your host, Matt Clark.
Go on in. Have a seat. Go over to the president. Come on in. Somebody knows. Oh, yeah. Is the hair good? Is the hair good? Yeah.
Greetings, Internet, YouTube, children of all ages. It is I, still your unemployed superhero. I know you're upset by that. Coming to you live from a balmy Independence, Iowa. It's been in the 80s, like for the last 3 or 4 days. Kind of weird. It's like 75 in my house right now. So I don't want to turn on the air conditioner until I absolutely have to. Which will probably be like today sometime. Anyway. So, like I said, my week last week was a little rough. By the way, to finish a thought, man, my hair is all fucked up today. To finish a thought about what I put in the opening, if you You know what? We're going to say that to the final thought. We'll say that to the final thought. Last week, a lot of crazy shit happened. The big crazy shit. It started out with Clapper and Sally Yates testifying before the. He loves testifying, by the way. Max does. Testifying in front of the Senate. I think it was the Senate Intelligence Committee. About your friend and mine, Michael Flynn, who is the fired former head of intelligence for the Trump White House. Some shocking stuff came out of that, by the way. Shocking stuff. I think the one thing that shocked me the most is that there is a female Asian Buddhist senator. Who'd have thought? And it's on that committee. Trump's fucked. Anyway. I also found out that Al Franken's on that committee, who is a Jew from Minnesota. Which is fine these days. Nothing wrong with it. I'm from Iowa. We're right underneath Minnesota, so I'm kind of shocked to see that as a Jews in Minnesota. I mean, there's two things to do in Minnesota, for the most part. That's be in the outdoors and fish. That's about it for Minnesota. Prince is dead, so not much to do there in Minnesota. That's two things I don't associate with the Jewish people. I mean, let's stop for a second. The Jewish people's record in the outdoors, not that good. Not that good. I mean, there's the whole thing in the desert. You know what I mean? They wander in the desert for like 3,000 years looking for Israel. So they got a bad sense of direction to begin with. Can't read a map, obviously. So I can't imagine Jews out, camping. It take them like 3 months to find their car. So that kind of surprised me. And then the fishing part, as far as I know, there are only like 12 Jewish fishermen in the history of fishing. And they were all apostles. So, and now that I think of it, technically speaking, since they were apostles, they all followed Jesus. So technically, they were Christians. So I'm not even sure we can call them Jews. So, but anyway. Then, of course, on Tuesday, the bomb dropped, and James Comey was fired by President Trump. Now, I've watched a lot of cable news at the retirement home with Pop. Pop's kind of trying to follow all this because he hates Donald Trump. And it kind of shocked me, some of the similarities between what happened with James Comey and what happened to me. Again, I'm not saying our situations are the same. There's an equality there. There isn't. James Comey is in a different world than I'm not a politician. Never worked for a politician. Never worked in Washington, D.C. Never worked for the intelligence community. Different circumstances. But there are some similarities in what happened to both of us. The first major similarity that I found between myself, and by the way, this is as close to an explanation of why I got fired you'll probably ever get from this channel. I'm not going to mention names or companies because I'm afraid of getting sued. I'll explain that here in a little bit. But this is probably the closest you're going to get to it. First of all, one similarity that I have with James Comey is that James Comey worked for a narcissist, self-absorbed, egotistical, inept, in every conceivable way at what they do, blowhard, who is vindictive, would have fits of rage over what they thought were disrespect to themselves and the position they held. His boss had no reason to be in the place that he was. And what I find interesting too, it turns out there's actually 2 layers beneath James Comey's boss before he gets to the president. There's the Deputy Attorney General, the Attorney General, and then the president. James Comey does not talk to the president. He talks to the Justice Department to the president. I, in my former position, had a supervisor above me, a director above that, and then the person who had me fired. So I found that interesting. Not to mention the fact that the person I just described, Donald Trump, the narcissist, egotistical, self-absorbed, inept, completely unqualified for their job person, is exactly the same person that fired me, believe it or not. Had no business being in the job they're in. A tyrannical person. They rule their roost by fear, not by loyalty. And so I find it amusing when people start talking about loyalty. When Trump starts asking, it's not about loyalty, it's about fear. The narcissism, the egotisticalness, the self-absorption lead them to believe that, and I'm talking in general about a specific type of person here. The egotism, the self-absorption, it all leads them to believe that they're good leaders when they're not. The thing is, though, and this is what's bad about Trump, because the same characteristic in Trump is in the person that fired me. They're totally inept. They know they're in and over their heads, and they know they're inept. When you get those characteristics together, you get a tyrant. All right, you want somebody. You have somebody who's in charge that can't have people see that the emperor has no clothes. They're paranoid, which Trump is as well. Incredibly paranoid. And that paranoia comes from the fact they know they shouldn't be where they are, and they're constantly worried someone's going to call them on it. And even if they're in a position where nobody can call them on it, they want complete, utter submission to who they are. And you've worked for somebody like that. I know you have. If you've worked in any kind of job, I know you've worked for somebody like that. Think back of the one boss that you never liked, who was a micromanager, who made everything about them in the office, who stole people's ideas, maybe, and called them their own. You've worked for somebody like that. That's Donald Trump. You worked for Donald Trump at one point in time, just like James Comey did, and just like I did. I didn't deal with this person every day, just like James Comey didn't. But in the end, you get sacrificed to them because nobody will cross them, because they're also vindictive. We'll get to that here in a minute. Similarities between myself. James Comey made a mistake with what he did with the Hillary email thing. I think everybody will agree with that. Even James Comey will agree with that. I made my share of mistakes too. I don't argue that point. I don't know James Comey personally, but I know for myself, I hate bullies. And that's what Donald Trump is. At his core, he's a bully. Because when you're a bully, you're trying to instill fear into people so they don't question you. And like I said, I worked for Donald Trump. So I also worked for a bully. And I don't like bullies. It's ingrained in my nature. So I feel for James Comey on that one as well. James Comey had a lot of bullies to deal with, Donald Trump being one of them. So I feel for him there as well. James Comey was also in an impossible situation, which I don't want to frame the situation I was in as being impossible, but it was a tough situation because, you got a group of people over here that think what you're working on is the linchpin to everything. That unless this task gets finished, all other work will never happen. And then over here, you have a group of people who could give a shit about what you do. They don't want to give you any resources. They don't want to give you any help. They don't care about what... They don't think what you're doing means anything. So you got those two sides. The one side screaming for results, and the one side just not giving a shit whether results happen or not. And it's a hard line to walk. Trust me on that one. Especially when nobody has your back. Which is also a problem James Comey had. And I had. Nobody really defended me either. Everybody, of course, was worried about their position, their job. And I understand it. If you got a family and you're supporting a family, you view life differently. I don't view life that way. When I see, like I said, I hate bullies. And if I see somebody getting bullied, I'm going to defend them. But it's a lonely place when you don't have anybody at your back. When you get hung out to dry, pretty much. Which both James Comey and I have in common as well. James Comey and I also said things in public that Donald Trump wouldn't appreciate. In James Comey's instance, he wouldn't defend Donald Trump when it came to the surveillance of Trump Tower, or the fact that there was no such thing as a Russia tie. He wouldn't come out and say that, so it offended Trump. And Trump is vindictive. Trust me on that one. Sally Yates knows how vindictive Donald Trump is. In my case, someone tried throwing me under a bus. My Donald Trump tried throwing me under a bus, and I defended myself. And this pissed my Donald Trump off more than you could possibly imagine. Because once again, we have a tyrant king that can't have anybody question them. Alright? You just lay down for them. Donald Trump. Vindictive, self-absorbed. Anything you say contrary to what they say is a personal attack. Why? Because they know they're inept. So they have no idea how to defend themselves. So basically that's why I got fired. A vindictive person read an email that called into question their expertise, and it really wasn't. Not really. And because they're constantly watching for people to question them, Donald Trump's the same way. Fake news, ring a bell. They're quick to jump on anything that questions their abilities. And like I said, in my position, I was tossed to the wolves for the most part. Which, I'm moving on. I think I've moved on from it. I'm sure James Comey moved on. I'm sure his golden parachute was a motherfucker. All those years in government service, I'm sure he's not hurting. I'm sure he'll find a job, no problem. But that's what I'm trying to do now, is just kind of move on from the whole thing. I did learn some things from the experience. And I've learned what kind of place I want to work at. Because I'm tired of politics and I'm tired of political people. I'm tired of small people. Donald Trump is a small man. The Donald Trump you know, or you knew, are small people. That's the sad thing about the world today, is that the people who are actual real leaders in this world, you know, the people that are actually people you want to get behind and be led by, don't want to be leaders anymore because there's too many Paul Ryans and Donald Trumps with large, very, very fragile egos and low intelligence that jump into the void, and you got to deal with them. And let's face it, if you didn't have to deal with a Donald Trump, would you deal with him? I wouldn't. So, you know, those are my parallels to James Comey, and what I found interesting. I too got a letter. I was fired on a Thursday. I came to work, worked an 8-hour day. 15 minutes before I would go home, my immediate supervisor took me to HR, and I was handed a letter and told, bye. 16 years of work, and I got a letter, and then the head of the security for the organization walked me back to my cubicle and watched me box up some personal items, and that was that. I got a letter just like James Comey did. Yeah, the person who fired me just like Donald Trump, didn't have the balls to actually face me and tell me that I was fired. So, like I said, I feel for James Comey because I feel like I kind of know what he went through and what his firing was like. He'll probably never watch this video. He has no idea who I am. But I do have a little soft spot for James because I too was shocked when I got let go. I didn't have them chase me down a Los Angeles freeway like fucking OJ. That was surreal. I actually watched his plane take off on CNN, believe it or not. If you watch CNN, you might have seen it too. They actually filmed his plane leaving Los Angeles to go home. Very surreal. But I think the one thing I pull from all of this, though, and what happened to James Comey, there was a huge backlash last week and into this weekend about his fire. Constitutional crisis. We got a constitutional crisis. He served up some good old boys to be his new FBI director. God only knows who he's going to put in the chair. But I think the one thing that troubles me more than all of this, though, is that in the end, it's not going to mean anything because the Republicans, they're not going to stop him. They finally got somebody in the White House. They have an agenda. They want to take away your health care. They want to they want to take away anonymity from the internet. They've already done that. Net neutrality is next. By the way, Google John Oliver net neutrality. There's some really great videos. I tried to do one, but I don't have the resources that John Oliver does. He does a great job breaking down what net neutrality is why it's important it stays, and what the Republicans are trying to do to it, watch those videos. Go up there to the search bar, after I'm done, of course. Don't do it now. Go up there and search for John Oliver, net neutrality, and you'll see a good video on it. So they're not going to do anything. They don't give a shit. Republicans are not. This is what pisses me off. Not to get political for a moment, but all the people that vote like Ted Nugent. Let's take Ted Nugent for a second. Ted Nugent, who has a TV show where he goes out in the woods and chucks a bow and arrow at deer and whatever else he can zoom at. He's all behind Trump. Does he realize what the EPA is trying to do to the great outdoors? The great outdoors he hunts in won't exist because of Republicans. It blows my mind that these people follow these idiots who have no interest in doing anything for them. All because of, I don't know. It just blows my mind. And they're going to get away with it. Trump's not getting impeached, folks. And we're going to have 8 years of him, just so you know. I'm waiting for 2018 for this bloodletting that ain't going to fucking happen. You just wait. Yeah. And granted, the things I've said about Donald Trump, I'm thinking probably in 3 or 4 years I'll be in prison anyway. Because by then, we'll have an oligarchy and anybody who's against Trump will be put in prison. Some would say I deserve it. So yeah. For my final thought...
Final thoughts.
For my final thought tonight, I want to go back to my pop real quick. And be a little more political again. This whole healthcare mess that's going on right now. There's something you should know, I think, about it. A lot of people that I talk to in rural America, where I live, who have, decent, $35,000, $40,000 a year jobs, don't really concern themselves with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act or the American Health Care Act, whatever the Republicans are selling this day of the week. They don't think about it much because it's not really going to affect them because they get their insurance through their company. That's very short-sighted, though, because there's a generation of people, my father's generation, probably your parents' generation, that rely on Medicare and Medicaid to help them in their golden years. My dad worked his entire life, 38 years for John Deere, 38 years for John Deere in Waterloo. The majority of his life at John Deere was in the powerhouse running boilers and electrical systems, HVAC. The last few years after they shut down the HVAC facilities, he worked the finish line building tractors. He worked his entire life. Since he was 15 years old, he worked. My dad was not lazy by any means. And he worked tons of overtime. I had a good childhood. I've mentioned it before. Well, after all of that, he was also in the Navy, by the way, during Vietnam. He was at the Bay of Pigs. At least he says he was at the Bay of Pigs. I have no proof, but that's the stories he tells me. After all that, he has dementia. And a colorful fact, the majority of healthcare plans in this country do not cover dementia because dementia is a mental health thing. And a lot of insurances don't cover mental health. The reason they don't cover dementia is because there isn't a cure for it. It's not something you can treat. You just kind of write it out. And what the Republicans have done in their new legislation also makes it possible that you don't get insurance at all. for his condition. He's in a rest home right now. The entire thing is being paid for by Title 19, which, of course, the Republicans cut drastically with the Affordable Health Care Act. So if you think what's going on in the healthcare community now doesn't affect you because you've got a job, you've got insurance through your job, it's not your problem. Think about your parents for a minute. And when they get to the point where they can't take care of themselves in their home anymore. If there's no Medicare, Medicaid to put your parents in a retirement community, retirement home, guess where they go? Your house. They gotta go somewhere. Because if you leave them at home by themselves and they can't take care of themselves, and eventually they have a medical mishap, we'll call it, a medical misadventure, and you take them to an emergency room to get looked at, and the doctors there think that the reason they're in the shape they're in is because of neglect, which I was accused of at one point in time, you can go to jail for that. In fact, I was told by a doctor, it was a doctor. I was told by a doctor that if your parent dies and it was found that they died because nobody was taking care of them, you can get charged for manslaughter, reckless endangerment, so to speak, neglect, kind of like a child. It's funny because all those jokes you hear are true. As your parents age, they kind of become your child, just so you know. So, if you don't think what the Republicans are doing with health care will affect you, think again. Because it's going to affect you when you get old. And if you have parents who are still alive today, who are not yet at that point where they can't take care of it, especially if, like, you have God forbid, one of your parents passes away before the other, and they're both not there to take care of each other, and like for my instance, my dad is there by himself, and there's nobody to take care of him, they get to move in with you. And I guarantee you, your insurance won't cover them. I guarantee you that. There's a lot more to it than you think. Trust me. You don't want to be in the situation I'm in. What I had to do to get my dad the care he needs. Lawyers got involved. It's just a mess. Like I said, part of the reason why I think I'm still unemployed is because whatever runs the universe is waiting for this to play itself out, and my dad to get control of himself and to be okay with being where he's at. And as soon as that happens, I think the dam will break for me. At least that's kind of the way I'm looking at it right now, anyway. Well, I've wandered on more enough. If you have an opinion, put it below. Thoughts, concerns. If you hate Jim Comey, like Jim Comey, send me an email, put it in the comments below, like the video, subscribe, tell your friends, your family. I'm still here. That's all I got for today. Until the next video, be good to your mother. Don't drink downstream from the herd. Don't tug on Superman's cape. Stay sexy, San Diego. And be well. Talk to you again soon. Clark out.